I'm Ruth Molman from the Farmington Hills Historic District Commission, and I'm here with Lenore Kingston, who is the Student Assistant Program Coordinator. Am I right?
Yes, you are.
From the Eagle School. And Eagle School is having a 50th anniversary, and Lenore became interested in what we had on Ward Eagle, for whom the school is named. And so started remembering some of the things about Ward Eagle. As the Historic District Commission, in order to save the properties and designate the properties, does a considerable amount of research. And during the research, of course, we found out about Ward Eagle. And his family goes back to 1834. They were pioneer settlers in Oakland County. And then that was Solomon and Eliza Eagle. It's 1834 settlers, and then followed by Robert and Isabella, who brought property on what is today 14 Mile and Middle Belt Road, where their farm was. They had a little girl, Zeta Eagle, who was there when they bought the property, and then Ward was born there. Ward Eagle was born there in 1891. Now, he had a very interesting background, inasmuch as he was around during all of the changes that occurred between the beginning of the 20th century. You're going to be going from the pioneer farming that the pioneer Eagles did, where they had everything was centered on the farm. They didn't have to buy anything. They made practically everything, to the period of the Civil War, when the dairy farming came in. And during this period is when Ward Eagle was born on this farm. They probably changed the farming methods, and then they were able to bring in the machinery. And of course, the major change, the fantastic change, was the automobile. And the farmers didn't even wait for an automobile. They would put I guess it's a Federalist mechanism on their trucks, and they could turn on their wagons and turn the wagons into trucks. Now, during this period of dairy farming, Ward Eagle became very involved with the dairy farmers situation, and they, for the milk producers organization, it was like a union for the farmers to get a fair price for their milk. And they would take the milk, and at first they brought it up to what were called milk receiving stations. They would bring it in their wagons, and there was one lady that drove up there, and she was she rode away at age 14 for a driver's license, and she was driving one of these Federalist trucks up to the milk receiving station, and the men would take the milk out for her. And that was followed by a period when the trucks came actually to the farms and took the milk from there. And now this school is very interesting because it was on the farm that Ward Eagle had. And most of the farmers that would have the schools, that would donate the schools, had children. Ward Eagle never had any children, although his sister taught in the Farmington schools, in the one-room schools, which were from, I guess, 1st through 8th grade, during her complete teaching career. And Ward Eagle sold off in the 50s, after World War II. He sold off his property as subdivisions. And all of a sudden, he found himself in this area where they had the little one-room school, the little German school up the way there, and they couldn't accommodate all the children. So he took the overflow, and of course he put them in the barn, the second floor of his barn, and the children went to school there. Now, how is it that you became involved in wondering about the school and about Ward Eagle?
I had some idea that our school wasn't named after a bird. We have a lot of eagles at Eagle Elementary School, and many people just assumed that we were named after the bird. And I just had was a fifth grade teacher named Kate Carlson who I reached out to that recently retired, and she said, oh, no. It was named after a person named Ward Eagle, and now we're going to be celebrating our 50th anniversary next fall, and I just thought that we should know the real story about how our school came to be.
Well, he was involved. He was a township supervisor. What is now Farmington Hills was part of Farmington Township, and he served as on the board for a number of years. Although he was a farmer, he was very active in these things. Actually, he started out, and as a young man, he went to the German school, and then when it was time for high school, he walked along 14 Mile to the DUR, which ran up Orchard, what is currently Orchard Lake Road. That was a whole mile. He caught this streetcar, and he went to school, which went all the way through to actually 2 years of college. And he came back, and he was teaching. I know he taught at the German school, and then he taught at this school, the Coleman School, that doesn't exist anymore, that was underneath where 696 is today. And he taught there. That must have been quite a walk. He used to walk up there, I understand. And the young men he actually, I think, wanted to be a lawyer. And he started in, and he was teaching in order to get money to go to school. And something happened on the farm, and he had to go and run the farm. And so this is what he did. And during that time, he was still active in the community. They talk about him being a township supervisor, but that only lasted for 6 months. He didn't want to do that. He had other things he wanted to do. He was more involved with the Milk Producers Association. And Farmington changed dramatically once they started to sell off the farms as subdivisions, because this support group that could come in, they couldn't do it unless there were a lot of farms. And as the farms were gone, to subdivisions, I think it was 1956, they could no longer have dairy farms there. Because who was it told me that? Nick Spicer told me that, because they had to give up their farming. Now, what did the children want to know about Ward Eagle?
So we're just getting started in knowing that what happened on our property, and just this whole idea, what existed on Eagle School's property before it was Eagle School. We're just, I'm hoping that we can open their eyes to history through this venture.
This is what it looked like in, what was this, 1974. It still was pretty. This is 14 Mile and Farmington Road.
Oh, that's 14 in Farmington. Okay.
Yeah, but it all looked like this. They actually had a little village there at one time. This is one of Ward Eagle's barns. The one that I think where Eagle School is now, where the children went to school on the second floor, was a more developed barn than this one. This was one of the cow barns that was on his property. And his home was, the site of his home was buried by the road. When the road came through,
that was Middle Belt Road, right?
Yeah.
When they widened to widen Middle Belt Road, you said?
Yeah. That was where Robert and Isabella built their house and ran their farm from there. And he sold that off. And he moved to this little house where that has existed today, that was a blacksmith shop. It's interesting with blacksmith shops. You know how we have the corner gas stations? Mm-hmm. That was equivalent. Mm-hmm. And they had them all over. And you look at a map, and you'll see BS on it. That's a blacksmith shop, the local blacksmith shop. What sort of questions did the children ask about this area? Did they have any concept of the kind of lifestyle it was?
I don't think so. I think that we're really that's part of the teaching and part of my learning. I think before the children can have an understanding, the teachers need to have an understanding. And so that's why when I had to do a research project to find you. And I was very happy that I found you to answer my questions. And each time I talk with you, you give me a little bit more of a tidbit that I didn't know before, and I quickly write it down so I won't forget.
Well, I've been very lucky because in researching the properties for the Historic District Commission, I got to talk to a lot of people that are no longer around that remembered a lot of things that are very, very different for us. Of course, the thing that the automobile is what made the fantastic difference in lifestyle. And the automobile and the development of the bathtub were at the same time, and they asked the farmer's wife, "Why is it you got the car before you got the bathtub?" And she said, "Well, you can't go to town in a bathtub."
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was a world, but it's interesting how sophisticated Farmington was. I don't know if the kids realize.
In what way was it sophisticated?
They had a lot of organizations here that they did things, like the Ladies Literary Society and the Children's Literary Society. They studied books, and they were for a rural area, they were fairly intelligent and well-educated. Mm-hmm. We had more teachers that had actually gone to college because they could teach in these one-room schools if they finished 8th grade. Can you imagine?
No. Yeah.
Can you imagine an 8th grade girl trying to deal with, young...
They were actually the age of an 8th grade girl?
Yes, trying to teach school to those children, those active little children. Did the children ask about what life was like at all? Were they interested?
I think they're interested. Each time I give them a real example of something, like the one when you told me about the tree. Do you know why we still have that tree on 14 Mile and the sidewalk goes around it? And it was because you told me Ward Eagle was he threw it. I don't know what, he was very firm that you can't chop down that tree. Well, children would care about things like that. That would be important. So that was a real, I thought, interesting thing, because when we have a evacuation drill from Eagle School today, whenever we do, we walk right by that tree. And so now when I go by that tree, it has a totally different meaning to me now that I know why the sidewalk curves.
Yes, well, of course, getting rid of it's very interesting. The pioneers got rid of the trees, and here's Ward Eagle 50 years later, half century later, or 75 years later, protecting a tree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, we have, on our playground, we practically, have no trees. We have maybe one tree, and I've always wondered, where are the trees? Why don't we plant trees? Well,
they wanted to have a crop.
Sure.
You can't have trees and a crop. One of them gets the land of the other. Actually, it's kind of interesting because they had two kinds of development after the Civil War. They had fruit farming and dairy farming. If the land was really super good, they planted the trees, apple trees primarily in this area. And at first, they would take them out to the railroad, which was in Novi, with the apples. And also, when the DUR, this rapid transit that lasted from the turn of the century to the 1930s, they could put the milk on the DUR and then take it into the cities.
The DUR is?
The Detroit United Railroad. It was a rapid transit system that went all over Michigan. And it didn't last because the automobile and the trucks could get you around a lot easier. The DUR is on a track, and here you could actually go to your farm with a car or a truck. And I see they celebrated. You have
right.
Article there where they were celebrating the 40th anniversary of the school.
She's the principal. That was Sue Johnson, who really, our office is filled with eagles. So that's why we're like, So she really promoted, Sue Johnson really promoted eagles, the bird eagles. So that's why there was, we must have like 5 or 6 eagles.
In the school? Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of fun. Well, see, what happened is the property owners, usually they had children. In Ward Eagle's case, it was unusual. He was very devoted to the community. And so he, although he didn't have children of his own, he was interested in children. And of course, his sister, who was teaching, cared about the children. So that's why they devoted his land. But usually what they did in these little, that's why it was a German school. Actually, the man's name was probably not German at all. He was English. And it's kind of...
But his last name was German, right?
His last name
was his name, German.
German.
Yes.
Actually, it was Samuel Bryant that built the school earlier, and then probably in the 1850s. And then the school burned in the 1870s. And at that time, it was George German's land, and he had cows over there. I still remember the cows sticking their nose over that fence on 14 Mile Road.
14 Mile
and Middle Belt.
Really?
That was the farm that was there, and he rebuilt the school, and he got his name on it. It's actually, they had 10 districts in Farmington Township, and each little area had their own little school board, hired their own teachers, and had their own little 1st through 8th school.
And how did it all come together?
In 1944, I believe they decided that the schools had to become more sophisticated. And when the children got to high school age, the local districts would pay for the children to go to school, but the parents had to provide the transportation. And that's where the DUR, a lot of children that never would have had a chance went in the DUR. The Detroit United Railroad take them into, they went to Pontiac, and another attractive place for them, the ones that really wanted to be farmers, was Walled Lake, because they had a system in Walled Lake where the children could get scientific farming. Almost, of course, there were a few of them that actually went to Michigan State, scientific farming, and that was quite early years for them at the turn of the century, because they made the mistake of sending Fred Warner to Michigan State, and he was interested in commerce, and they gave him a plot of land and some books on how to farm, but he sold that off to another Farmington person who was going to continue to farm. But they had the beginning of scientific farming right here in Michigan, Michigan State. And they had it in Walled Lake. They had, on a high school level, they were giving these kids education in that area.
Do you know how many dairy cows Ward Eagle had on his property?
Well, there was enough, I guess, to fill a couple of barns. We have this picture of this barn, which was a cow barn. I don't know, how many cows could you put in here? They put them in these stanches. They have examples of this in the barn at Heritage Park. You could see the cow stanches that they had for them. And
he probably let them roam on his property, where nowadays I don't know how much they roam on. I don't know.
They roam around and they eat whatever's down there.
How large was his property? How many acres did he have?
160, I think it was.
160. So it ranged from, I can't imagine, like where Northwestern is right now. So it was maybe this side of Northwestern, or?
Yeah, except Northwestern wasn't there.
Exactly, I understand. So I'm just trying to think about how big his property was.
They were big. It was large properties, and it went on both sides of the road.
Both sides of Middle Belt Road?
No, his was both sides of 14 Mile, west of Middle Belt, and then on the other side was extending down for a ways was the German farm on that side. And then there was a family by the name of Bigelow that lived on the corner of, the other corner of 14 Mile would be the west corner. And they had a brick factory. and they made bricks. And
Right across the street from us then.
yeah, well, the
Okay.
brick factory was down at Inkster.
Okay.
There's a great big gully there, and that wasn't the original gully. They took out all of the material. There's some sort of special clay, I guess. They make bricks.
Mm-hmm.
So they had all of these things right in the local area, and of course the blacksmith shop, which somebody moved the blacksmith shop. You see the later maps, they moved it to wherever. Actually, no, they moved it to North Farmington. And there was a man by the name of Kerry Cole, I believe, who had a shop where they went. Those awful little towers that they had. It was behind that they had he had a blacksmith shop, and that served the neighborhood from.
You're talking about like at Farmington and 13? Is that what you're talking
No,
about?
I'm talking about Farmington and 14.
And it's still the same place. Okay. So the blacksmith shop was really right across the street. Next, near that cobblestone building that you said was used as a
That was the shop.
storage place. That was
the shop, and then when Ward Eagle bought it from them, he turned it into just a storage area.
okay. So that was a blacksmith shop before it was a storage place. Okay.
On the farm.
That cobblestone building.
Building.
That's on. Okay.
And then another blacksmith came in what was a little village there at 14 Mile and Farmington Road.
Okay.
So that village sort of extended around, and where they sell artwork now. That was a dairy barn for another farm. At one time, it was all tiled inside. It was beautifully a white, clean-looking building, and they converted it to a very interesting art store. And they had the first of the supermarkets in North Farmington, where Dunham's is today, was one of the first supermarkets there.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And where they developed this whole development in West Bloomfield was part of the North Farmington area at one time. It's funny how commerce seems to gravitate to the same areas, although a little more sophisticated at this point.
You said that Ward Eagle, there was the milk station where Ward Eagle brought his milk. Was it 14 and Farmington Road?
Right.
Right. Uh-huh.
The Dickey milk producers, milk collection station. And somebody would come to that. I guess they had a truck that would pick it all up and take it in. Before they had the transportation, it went to the cheese factories, and they made cheese out of this.
Out of Ward Eagle's milk?
Probably his father's milk.
Okay.
Probably by the time Ward Eagle
Okay.
came along, it was running the farm. By the 20s, they had the trucks.
Okay.
So they would have probably taken it to the cheese factory. There was a cheese factory out 14 Mile Road also, where they would process this. The Warners had I think there were 14 of them.
14 children?
No, 14 milk collecting
Oh,
stations, 14 dairies or cheese factories
in our area?
in our greater Farmington area, extending into. Actually, the people around 14 Mile and Middle Belt, where Ward Eagle was, they had connections to Franklin also. So it's funny how they circulate and go to these various places. But it will be fun to go ahead with some of the things for the kids for them to understand what it was like on a farm. It's really
Yeah, that would be an interesting thing since we're not sure. The PTA president just came to me yesterday and was asking me, and I was telling her that I was researching some information about Ward Eagle, and so she really wants to get together. We haven't really planned how we're going to celebrate our 50th anniversary, and so we're sort of collecting ideas, and the 40th anniversary was more getting back into the 50s and that whole idea. But I don't think our principal at that time researched actually the origin of how Eagle became Eagle. So we might put a little different spin on it.
Yeah, actually, they have one barn that's still left, right still is a barn down the road a little bit. I think the child goes to your school.
What? I don't know. Oh, I no, he's not in our school. The one you were just talking. There's a historic home on 14. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes,
he was at our school. I think he's in 6th grade now.
You know, they have they have a Victorian house actually there, and a barn that was an actual barn that was used.
And that was a barn from Ward Eagle's property?
No, that was a different farm. That was Colonel Benjamin's farm, I understand.
Okay. So Ward Eagle's farm was more long and narrow, maybe, rather than in the width, because that's not so far away from us.
Yeah, that was another of the farms, and the farmers cooperated on a whole bunch of things, from the harvesting. When they got the machines to come in and harvest, they would cooperate on the harvesting and all the other things that they would do.
So Ward Eagle grew a lot of other, I mean, he did grow products. He was not just a dairy farmer.
Well, as a dairy farmer, he would grow things for the cows to eat during the winter.
Sure.
And he possibly had a few apple trees and stuff if there was any good land to grow them on.
Okay.
But he was primarily a dairy farmer and was very interested in that. He actually went to Europe and helped the Russians with their dairy farming.
Oh, wow.
Is a member of the Milk Producers Association.
He was the originator of that organization, wasn't he? And,
yes.
And was in it for what, 40 years or?
Well, for a lifetime, I guess.
For a lifetime.
Yes.
They still have a website. I went on their website a few weeks ago.
Well, there's still dairy farms in Michigan.
Sure, sure.
Just out where they can bring in the services to them. Well, I want to thank you for the things that you're doing. It's wonderful to take this material for the children. And,
yeah, I think we don't appreciate what happened before us. We just, as children, take things for granted, you know, and we just think it's always been like this.
Yeah, it's always, subdivisions are relatively new, although it's hard to realize.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
But we have to realize where we've been and where we're going.
And that's a good way to put it.
It's
well, he was definitely a leader, so that's exciting to think about, that our school was named after a leader.
Oh, definitely, a very important part in the community. They called them, well, they were sort of like a judge, who worked as a judge on the board, and he led the community, and of course he was a Mason, and he was involved with all the leaders in the community. There's a picture of him. The only picture that we have is that picture where he's sitting with the township board.
You said he was very shy and didn't want his picture taken, or modest, or?
Yeah, there's practically no pictures of him at all.
Was he a public speaker? Did he like to talk in front of groups, or he was basically a quiet person?
Basically a quiet person, but he did things one-to-one. I guess he must have, as a milk producer, must have gone in front of groups. He must have. Yeah,
as president of that organization.
Yeah. So I guess he just didn't take pictures. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.